Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, let me just paint the picture for so many people in corporate America. You're doing your job, you're rocking and rolling, you're doing a great job. And then what happens one day? You get promoted. They say, oh, you would be so great as a manager. You need to manage these people so they can learn all the things about, what you do and, go. And 9 times out of 10, you do that and you never get any training whatsoever on how to be a leader. And so God, that is such a reality of, how work works right now. And I've actually tackled this conversation in a slightly different direction. I want to simplify how you can build a leadership legacy as you rise in your career. And so my special guest today, her name is Rhoda Banks, and I'm so excited for you guys to meet her. She's a senior HR and talent executive, an executive coach, an educator, an author, and a podcast host with more than 20 years experience in leadership specifically. She's also the founder of the Rhoda Experience and the host of Breakthrough Conversations with Rhoda & Co. She's an adjunct instructor who's passionate about helping professionals build future-ready skills and thrive in an evolving workplace. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Rhoda Banks. Hey, Rhoda.
Thanks for having me, Mary. I'm so excited. Thanks.
Oh, girl, like the picture I painted earlier, is that not the real truth or is that not the real truth?
That happens so much because someone is technically good. It's assumed, they can lead that whole team.
Yeah. And that's a whole completely different set of skills, managing people instead of managing deadlines or tasks or whatever. So, where I want to take this conversation is I know about you and the Rhoda Experience is that you're all about leadership legacy. And when you ask leaders to consider, say, the shadow they're casting or the imprint that they're making, how do leaders become more intentional about what they're known for when they're no longer in the room?
Right. Great question. First of all, I believe your leadership legacy is being created moment by moment, every day. It's not going to happen someday and you're going to look back and say, that's my leadership legacy. It's happening in every interaction. So the shadow you cast is coming through what you model, what you reward, what you tolerate, what you prioritize. And so I encourage leaders to ask themselves 3 questions. One is, what do I want people to say about my leadership when I'm no longer in the room? Ask yourself that, and the answer to that should drive some accountability in how you show up and how you lead and how you behave. The second question is, I am leading today, and am I leading today in a way that will cause them to actually say it? Like they acknowledge your leadership. And then the third question is, who is better because I had the opportunity to lead them? And so for me, legacy it's not about your title, definitely not about your title or your position. It really is about your imprint. Did I help someone become better? Did I create opportunities for others? Did I lead people and the organization better or stronger than it was when I found them? Because your leadership legacy, it will continue long after you leave the room.
Preach. I think that this is the reality of the fact is that you get promoted into a manager job. You get very little training on how to be a good leader, how to be a good manager. And so then you just sort of fall back on, well, I guess it's sort of this. And I guess it's about hitting these sales targets and making sure that I look good in front of my boss and really focus kind of inward and on yourself and almost like on your ego, whether that's conscious or unconscious. I want to clarify. We just sort of go, okay, I've got this big job title. I got this big salary now. I got to perform. And so I think some of our worst habits come out because of that sort of ego driven, pressure we put on ourselves. What could you speak into that?
Yeah, some of that is coming out because of our own lived experiences that have shaped who we are. So Some of that is coming out because of our own scars, our own traumas, or what we've observed as a leader from others, and we're bringing that with us. So, yes, ego can play a role and often does, but I think even when it does, that stems from something deeper that has taken place within the person. So, often in leadership, and specifically in leadership development, there's no focus internally. It's all surface. It's about skills and competencies and things like that. But it's never a focus on any self-awareness type of exercise and depth around that.
You're just building skills to get the
Yes.
job done. And we're not robots. We're actual humans that are so multifaceted. So let's talk about kind of the scars and you know, the leaders who can, what you say is leave a mark or leave a scar.
Yeah.
Like, what causes some leaders to negatively impact the people that they lead, even when that might not be their intention?
You mentioned earlier, either some things are conscious or they may not be conscious. So it's about self-awareness. I believe that most leaders, they truly want to leave a mark, and they want to leave a good one, but it's without self-awareness. And that mark without self-awareness can become a scar. And that often happens when leaders focus too heavily on something you said earlier, results. And they are so focused on the results that they lose sight of how those results are achieved, which is through people.
Relationships.
Right. They may move too fast. They might fail to listen. They may avoid difficult conversations. These are things I've observed. They may lead through fear. They may underestimate the impact of the words and behaviors. And so I've learned that intent and impact are not always the same, and impact isn't overridden by your intent. So the impact is the impact. It's going to have it no matter what your intent was. So you can have good intentions and still create an environment where people feel unseen or unheard or undervalued. So that's why leaders need feedback, and they need some humility to ask, what is it like to be led by me? And because ultimately people experience your leadership, they experience it through your behaviors and not your intentions.
Yeah, I can bring to mind immediately one of my worst bosses in my career. And I can bring in mind immediately one of my best bosses I've ever had in my career. And, you know, reality is they're both humans. They both are, you know, have a heart and are overwhelmed sometimes. And how they deal with stress and how they manage themselves is significantly different when I think about those two different types of people. So I have a lot of empathy for the horrible bosses out there, quote unquote. But I also think that there is a bit of this where you're right. I think you have to sort of have self-awareness to go, maybe this isn't working. Maybe I should try something different. Because you know, leading with tyranny or fear or power or control or treating people like children, it's not really working, is it?
It's not serving me well.
No, and it's not serving them well. And it's certainly not serving the organization well in the long term. It might create short-term results because, you know, fear and power and all control and all those things sometimes puts people in a pressure cooker and they get things done, but then they burn out or then it turns into a mess. So let's double click on what you said earlier about lived experiences. Because when you and I talked offline, you said that it's an 80-20 rule, that 80% of how we lead is from our lived experiences and only 20% comes from the role models, the past bosses we've had. So, you know, our lived experiences and how we've interpreted them, how does our inside stuff show up in our leadership every single day? And to your point, like, why do leadership programs, you know, often overlook that?
Right. Yeah, I remember saying that to you. I believe that our inside stuff, it shows up in how we respond to conflict, feedback, pressure, power, and sometimes even success. So we don't walk into leadership as a blank slate. We come as a whole person. So we bring our childhood experiences, previous bosses, the scar or impact that they had, the disappointments, insecurities, successes, and the stories we've created from all of it. All of that's coming with us. And as we are promoted into a leadership role. And those experiences shape how we communicate, how we build trust or not, how we delegate or not, how we make decisions, and how we lead people. And because we're humans, like you said earlier, and you can't turn that off. It is impacting how you lead. The challenge is that traditional leadership development programs often focus on the outside stuff, competencies, models, frameworks, tools, techniques. Those things matter, but they don't always address what's driving the behavior, which is coming from the inside. So I believe sustainable leadership growth starts from the inside out. I always say it's an inside out job. And before I can become a better leader of leaders, I have to understand what's leading me.
So how do we get there? What's the first question I need to ask myself to figure that out?
To get to some self-awareness and some ownership, you need to ask yourself or others, what does it feel like to be led by me? And you need to be open to the feedback and listen without defense. And you too can take some self-evaluation of yourself. Just observe how you're leading meetings, how you're interacting with your team one-on-one, how you're interacting when you're under pressure, how you're reacting if they make a mistake, if they miss a deadline. All those things are signals that you as an individual, if you just be intentional about paying attention to that and then do some self-evaluation on and decide what kind of leader do I want to be. If you're not pleased with that type of leadership, ask yourself what kind of leader I want to be. What kind of leader does my team need me to be? And then it requires a choice daily. It requires a choice every interaction, to be honest with you, on how you react to live up to whatever it is you've decided that the type of leader you want to become.
Let's zoom out from this for a sec, because I think what you're saying is so right on, spot on. Mm-hmm. Think about any big change in your life. Like, I want to, drop 40 pounds. Mm-hmm. I want to be more active in my life. Mm-hmm. I want to, XYZ. Put it in the blank. Until you actually make that choice to do something, you could go like, yeah, I want to earn $1 million this year, but you don't do anything. You don't make any choices that help you get closer to that goal. Right. It's just going to continue to be like, oh yeah, one day I might do that, And so what I hear you say in that daily choice, it's that discipline of saying, hey, I have an awareness that something is not quite what I want it to be. And I know that I want to get somewhere else, and I'm choosing to make a change. I think that's the large part of it, because so Rhoda, let me just be real with you. And I'm so curious what your thoughts and what your answer would be as a coach. So let's say you are a terrible boss and somebody has given you the feedback of like, you're not a good listener, or you rule with power and control. And I don't love it. It doesn't feel safe here. And you feel embarrassed by that feedback. Then it's like, how do you coach a person through that when they're like totally embarrassed by the feedback, don't really want to reveal it because all of a sudden they look weak in the workplace? How do you help that person?
Yeah, if the key is them wanting to help themselves. So if they are open to wanting to help themselves, then as a coach, I would coach them to say, first and foremost, it's okay to feel however you feel. Those feelings are valid, but it's also important to forgive yourself. And then I will coach them through how to get there, like how to get to a place where they can forgive themselves, and then start to coach them into what is the leader you want to become. You now have so much opportunity before you to create this legacy that could supersede the legacy you've already created.
Yeah. And I definitely want to talk into that, but I want to make sure I don't miss this point. I think a lot of times, at least the leaders that I've felt that are just not very good at being a great leader yet, are just too afraid someone's going to find out, somebody higher than them, and that they're going to lose their job. And in this day and age with layoffs and all the things, it's like, let's just put a mask on and hide that I'm not doing a very good job at managing these people and being a good leader. I think that there's just a lot of insecurity and masking that's happening because of it. So when you identify that insecurity is a driver with an individual, how do you help them feel empowered?
Yeah, so you're talking about the inside stuff. The fact that they feel like they have to put a mask on, that they're going to be found out, that is deeply rooted from somewhere in the inside. So you have to partner with them to do the inner work. As a coach, you're not telling them how to fix it. The answer is within them. You're asking empowering questions to help them realize, why is this important for you now? What story are you telling yourself that's making you believe that you may be found out? So it's a whole coaching experience that you will go through, but through by helping them to change their thinking around that, starting with what's driving this thought of I might be found out? What's even driving the fear? Like, let's get to the gremlins. Let's understand what's the mindset and what are some of those barriers we need to break through. Yes, and that is very much a service I offer as a coach as well. But it's powerful when I actually have witnessed it on more than one occasion. But there was this one leader who had a horrible reputation, and I worked with this person at 2 companies. And the reputation was so bad that I was afraid to be around the leader because of what I had heard. But I became close to this leader and built a relationship. And I understood he had not had the right mentorship. He hadn't seen what good leadership looked like. And so they got him a coach. And that coach, and he personally shared the story with me, that coach was really, really tough on him. And when he was sharing with me the light bulb moment that went off for him, he teared up and he said he regrets having left a trail of dead bodies. He said, because what I've learned is it's not so much of what you do, but your how that matters. And so that was an example of many that I've witnessed. But that one stood out to me because I had worked with this person at 2 companies, and at both companies, they had established that reputation because that's who they were. And from that evolved his leadership. He became softer. And like you said, I believe some people perceive what they think a good leader should look like and act like, and they're meeting the expectations of whoever is above them. And I believe that's why it's important that we always, no matter what position you're in, show up as your authentic self.
Yeah. And so I know a large part of your work is also helping people break generational patterns, because this stuff gets passed down in our DNA from one generation to the next. And for somebody who is a leader that's ready to break their own generational patterns, rewrite their story, and reclaim their power, where in your mind does that inner work begin?
Yes. And to your point, we're passing down this through our own DNA generationally. And when we're responsible for leading others, we're also passing it down through that figurative DNA. They're taking those practices and passing it down as well. So to me, it begins with awareness and ownership. So you have to understand your story before you can even rewrite it. So like the leader you described with the insecurities, and they need to understand what's behind all that. So ask yourself, what did I learn about leadership, power, success, conflict, or even failure from the environments that shaped me? And what am I still carrying that it is no longer serving me or serving others? Then you have to separate what happened to you from what you choose to become.
Yeah.
Again, there's the
1,000%.
choice again. So then you can only then reclaim your power. And reclaiming that power means recognizing that your past may explain some of your patterns, but it doesn't have to dictate your future. And you can't rewrite a story that you haven't been willing to read. And if you're not looking inside, if you're not being intentional about self-reflection and taking some ownership, you're not reading your own story.
It's so true. And I think this is a good time to mention your book that you have written as well. It's called Daughter of an Assassin, Turning Pain into Power, A Journey of Faith and Perseverance. Now, this is a memoir, Rhoda. Tell me a little more.
Yeah. So I decided to write my story for a few reasons. One, I have two sons, and they have lived more of a privileged life because of the hard work that I've gone through, me and my husband, to ensure that they didn't have to experience some of the things I experienced. So I've driven them to the neighborhood I grew up in. They met their grandmother, my mom, who have passed on now, but they would never know what was the making of Rhoda, what I went through. And it was a lot, and it was hard, and it was a lot of trauma. And I wanted to leave a record of that so that they have an understanding of who their mom is and was once I'm gone. And then the other thing was, there are so many Rhodas. There are so many people in the world that were born into a not so ideal family situation, etc. And sometimes those people get stuck, lost in the system, and they just never progress in life. I wanted to be an example, and I wanted others that inherited some of the same things I was born into to recognize that your past doesn't have to dictate your future. You can break down those generational curses. And in the Black community, we don't like to talk about mental health. We don't like to talk about the hard stuff that we go through. And we were actually trained, and we were told by our moms mostly, what goes on in the house stays in the house. And so a lot of people had a perception of how me and my three sisters grew up. And so they believed, like, there were stories and things they would hear, and they'd be like, that's not true. And in my opinion, you're discounting our lived experience when you do that. So they've read the book. And these are people who grew up with my mother, who was friends with her. And she's a central character in the book. So they got to really get behind the curtain to see some of the things we've gone through. And actually, her childhood best friend reached out to me after she read it. And she said, Rhoda, I had no idea you all were going through all of that. So that's the ultimate purpose of the book. And yes, I am truly the daughter of an assassin in two ways. My mother is a figurative assassin in this story, but I forgave her, and it's no fault of hers, because she was just living what she was inherited, and she didn't experience a lot of love because my grandmother was a alcoholic, and then she didn't experience. So you see the generational. And so my goal was to break that. And but my dad is a well-known in St. Louis. There's still stories being done on him to this day. Him and a whole nother gang in the late 60s and early 70s. I'm not proud of the things he had done, but I was aware of it, and I had to live under his shadow. So my mom would always say, don't tell anybody who your dad is. And as a kid, I didn't understand why. But I would say it, and it would instantly generate all this discussion. And one time I said it when I had a summer job, and it came up in conversation with my supervisor. And he looked at me and he said, you look just like him. Because my dad was killed when I was 5. And he said, he killed my brother. I was like, oh my God. I was 14. I don't know what that means. And I always responded the same way. I was 5 years old when he was killed. I didn't really know him. Well, later that day, the supervisor told me and my coworker we could leave early, and we were so excited. So we left, and the next day we got back, he fired us. And he said, because you left the job site. And we said, you told us we can leave early. He said, I did not. I did not understand it till I was in my late 20s, early 30s. When I ran home and I was crying and I said, he fired us. And my mom said, I told you to stop telling people who your dad was. It did not click until late in life. He couldn't stand to look at me because I looked so much like him. Yeah. And so that's the ultimate. It's a really positive message in the book, but it is heavy. And these are real stories, and these are things that I've gone through, and it's hard things. But again, it's written with the intent to help others that may be going through something similar.
You know, Rhoda, I'm so grateful that you shared the story with us, genuinely with your whole heart, because I think what that does for me is I do think about the horrible bosses I've had in my career and think, God, everyone's got a story, right? Not everyone's got a dad who was an assassin. Let's be real. Right. But we all have a story. We all have yuck that we come from, things that we hide under the surface, baggage that we're carrying that we tell very few people about. And I think you're right. I think that it does take some sense of emotional intelligence and self-awareness to go, I've been carrying this thing for way too long, and it's affecting how I'm showing up at work as a leader. And is it really worth hiding and shoving down and pretending like it doesn't exist? Or is it worth finally, doing the work, really digging into it and understanding what it means to me now and what I'm taking forward with it? Because I think you're right. I think the self-awareness is a place where you have to go, enough. I'm not going to pass this down to my children. I'm not going to pass this down to my direct reports. I am going to make a change. I'm going to feel empowered by my story and move forward. Is that your take on it?
It is. And to the point you just made, that's one of the huge motivators for me, is that I've had more bad bosses than good. And from those bad bosses, I remember how they made me feel. And I never want to be the reason why other people are feeling that way. I never want to be the reason why people are dreading going to work. I never want to be the reason why they're trying desperately to find another job. I want to be able to sleep, and I want to be the kind of leader that people get excited to want to work with and will follow you from company to company. And I have some of those followers. And that's what I want people saying about me and my leadership, and even how I live. Like, we're talking about leadership, but the way I live my life is through a legacy lens. What will people say about me when I'm gone? Okay, what do I want them to say? What impact do I want to have on the world? Okay, then what are things I can do that's going to drive that impact?
1,000%. And you say that life is hard enough and that people deserve to be handled with care. So what does it look like to be a leader who leads a legacy, who leads with that actual empathy, that authenticity, that courage and purpose, again, without sacrificing accountability or performance?
What's interesting is that there's a big percentage of people that believe that if you show too much empathy or human-centric leadership, then you're not holding people accountable. Well, I don't believe empathy and accountable are opposites. In fact, some of the best leaders I've experienced, they practice both. So leading with care is ultimately what it means. Leading with care means seeing the person while still being clear about the expectations. It is no different than the way you raise your children. Or if you have a really dear friend, you're not going to not tell them the truth and hold them accountable. You're going to tell them the truth and hold them accountable. Why? Because you care about them. And if you care about people, you're gonna be vested in their success. And sometimes that may come with me having to have a difficult conversation. It may come with me having to give some very honest feedback. It may come with me having to set boundaries. It may come with me holding people accountable, but doing it in a way that preserves that dignity. So people deserve to know where they stand and what they need to do differently. But you can be clear without being cruel. And you can hold people accountable without making them feel small. So for me, that's what it means to handle people with care.
And, I have no doubt in my mind, you have 20 plus years of experience in all assets of leadership development. I mean, you were the former executive head of culture and inclusion at American Ag Credit for well over 5 years. Yeah. I mean, you know your stuff, but I think that you as a leadership and career and life transition coach now can be so powerful for so many people who especially are navigating layoffs and are like, I don't know how to make sense of my career legacy at this point post layoff as well. So I just encourage anyone, if you're listening and you're curious about the work that Rhoda does in the world, I highly recommend reaching out to her. You can find all the things that we talked about on today's episode over at the show notes at thesimplifiers.com. That's where you'll find her social media links and her website, therhodaexperience.com, and all the details of the things that she's working on these days as well. Now, you also have a TikTok account as well, so people can get you in TikTok at Roro, right? RORO.
Roro.
I love it. It's a real talk. I'll put Rhoda in my pocket.
Yes.
Yeah. And you also have a one-day women's retreat coming up in St. Louis, October 2nd, 2026, called Women Unite to Ignite. Tell me more about that.
Yes. So remember I said it's more to me than leadership. It's about what impact I want to leave in the world. So a friend of mine and I both had a similar vision. We wanted to create spaces where we bring women together to build community and connection, because there's often this era of competition when it comes to women. And so we did our very first one-day retreat in 2023, and we were very intentional about how we designed it. So we had keynote speakers throughout the day. And if they were a speaker, they had two things they had to honor. One was they couldn't have PowerPoint, no PowerPoint. And two was whatever they were going to be doing or speaking on, it had to have an element of interaction. Nice. So it was a very interactive day, and we were up and we were in circles and we were doing things. It was so fun. We got so much positive feedback. And since 2023, the women keep reaching out to us saying, are you going to do it again? So we're bringing it back. And we have a website. It is www.womenunitetoignite. And you can learn more about that one-day retreat. It's here in St. Louis in an area called the Marquee at the St. Charles Newtown. It's a very unique space, and it just evokes happiness to me. It's so much natural light. And we have 3 women who attended the one in 2023 who will be doing 10-minute talks each. We call them Spark Stories. So that's their spark. And they attended the event in 2023, and each of them are going to share something that happened in their life or took place or evolved since they last attended this retreat. And it's going to be a really neat experience.
Yeah. Again, you can find the links over at the show notes at thesimplifiers.com. Everything that we talked about today is there. If you search for this episode, or again, go to that website, womenunitetoignite.com. So Rhoda, I got a couple of questions I got to ask you as we wrap up here that we ask everybody that comes on the podcast. Here we go. First off, what's one book or blog you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
Yeah. So I actually say I return to this one book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Mm-hmm. One of the principles that continues to challenge me is not taking things personally. So that's something I am constantly working on, because that's That is truly something I struggle with. And as leaders, we can internalize feedback, reactions, and even resistance. So it reminds me to stay curious about what's happening instead of immediately creating a story about what it means.
Oh man, it's such a good book. I go back to that over and over and over again. I'll link that up in the show notes for you guys if you are curious about that book, again, over at thesimplifiers.com. Okay, so tell me, who's one person in your network, somebody that you know personally, that you just think is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast. Who would that be?
This is fresh off the presses. So I met a young lady named Reunita Martin, Riunita Martin. And I had her on my podcast, and I loved her thought process and the way she spoke and her spirit and her aura so much that I invited her to be a guest speaker at one of the leadership virtual workshops that I did. And she has since written a book, and it's called Build the Leader, Transform the Trajectory. And she asked me to write the foreword. And I wrote the foreword, and the book will be published in the next couple of weeks. So I would highly recommend Reunita. We share a similar philosophy about leadership, particularly the belief that great leadership starts from inside, and it's ultimately about the impact we have on people. So she's preparing to publish that. She's also bringing a person with her, and she lives in Alabama, and they're coming to St. Louis for our Women Unite to Ignite one-day retreat. So I'll get to meet her in person for the first time.
That's awesome.
So I just think she's someone that she's not just writing a book. She is building a whole business around it. There's going to be workshops. Her podcast is centered around it. Everything is going to be shaped around this book. And it is phenomenal. Like, I read it and I can't stop thinking about it. I had to read it to write the foreword, and I have so many pages of notes from reading it. It is amazing. She has tools and resources. The work you need to do on the inside is embedded within the book.
Love it. Love it. We will link her up in the show notes so you guys can check out that book, and Reunita as well over at thesimplifiers.com. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful for growth and awareness. So the fact that I'm able to sit here and be here and on other podcasts, and I'm writing my own leadership book as well, but it's going to be very simple. I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for my health, and I'm incredibly grateful for my tribe. As I shared with you, I think I shared that I'm in transition. My position was eliminated in September of last year, and it's been challenging to find work. So I have a tribe of people who cheer me on. They lift me up. They remind me who I am. And sometimes, believe in me, when my own beliefs gets a little shaky. So I've learned to be grateful for growth that comes from both the beautiful and the difficult seasons in life.
Mm-hmm. And people need to experience the Rhoda experience. Yes. So I've only just gotten a taste, and I'm like, I'm sold. I'm all in 1,000%. So Rhoda, as I wrap up, my final question for you today is this. And again, thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, and she's feeling like, man, I really do want to lead and leave a leadership legacy in my career. I don't want to leave a trail of bodies and burnout. Right. I really do want to be a good boss. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
Oh, I would love to even interact with that person right now. Give her a big Rhoda hug. And I would whisper to her, and I would say, take 5 minutes today and answer one question. What do I want people to say about how they experience me as a leader? Then write down 3 words. Then choose one behavior today that brings one of those words to life. Simple. One step at a time. Small victories add up.
Amen to that. Rhoda, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.